Story is from Serena Snuggles. Roommates don't respect my boundaries. I get them evicted in less than a day. I don't know if this is it's certainly more than petty. Also, I apologize for any formatting. I'm on mobile and my first time posting any sort of longer story. Also, sorry for the long post. Background is pretty important. TLDR at the bottom. My freshman year of college, I went through a long process with my school to be able to live off campus as a freshman. Normally, this is not allowed, but they made an exception due to circumstances. I moved in on a lease takeover as a girl to an all-boy apartment. It was a 4-bedroom apartment that individually leased each room, but 2 rooms shared 1 bath and all shared a kitchen, living room, and laundry room. This place is being gross when I moved in, but I cleaned it up and got it livable enough. I grew up with brothers and had no problem with dudes as long as they were decently respectful. Plus, I had the kitchen to myself. I'm also an engineering student and asked them if they had their friends over to let me know beforehand, or keep the music below bed rattling. Turns out this exact apartment was known as the party apartment, and I would soon find out why. I was working 8 to 12-hour shifts at retail and then going to school full-time. I come home at 11 p.m. exhausted to blasting music, and so many people they are streaming out the front door. I was pissed. Luckily, each room locks with a deadbolt, and I remembered to lock mine before I left for work. There were easily 50 people there. As a 20-year-old who just wanted to sleep, I did the only rational thing I could do. I packed an overnight bag, locked my room, and called a friend with an SOS and slept there. I find out later that one of my roommates was dealing. Only 3 people were of legal drinking age, and 1 girl was 14. The GF of one of my roommates was still in HS and invited all of her friends, who invited more people. The cops busted the party, but luckily didn't card anyone, so no one was arrested. Now I felt like I could still reasonably deal with this. Then they started to use my things in the kitchen, steal my food, and the last straw was when they dented my kitchen knives that I had just purchased. Brand new knives that now had nicks in the blade like they sword fought with them. Mind you, I communicated all of my grievances that weren't super minor, like using my laundry soap, with them and asked that my boundaries be respected. Their guests would throw up and poop in the toilet. They would try to enter my room to use my bed while I was sleeping. The GF of one even ended up coming into my room to stare at me. I woke up when I forgot to lock my door to tell me 4 people were coming over. My food and my items were still being taken and damaged, and I grew tired of it all. I attempted to befriend the various roommates in an effort to get them to be more courteous, but the information I got was even better. Remember how I was a lease takeover? Yeah, our apartment not only required the necessary paperwork, they also required a lease takeover FEE. I find out that my roommates are friends of the people on the lease. Their friends upgraded to a different apartment complex and didn't want to pay that fee. My roommates hadn't paid the takeover fee or signed any paperwork putting them on the lease. So the original leaseholder wasn't living there. I keep this information for later. A few weeks pass and the parties are smaller, but still happening. Then one day I am discussing painting my room due to the marks on the walls from the previous tenants. Our apartment allowed you to paint if it was 1, approved first, or 2, you painted it back before move-out. The maintenance guys were super sweet and let me pick a custom color for my room, a pretty light sky blue, bought it for me, and helped me paint my room. My roommates find out I painted and ask about it, not knowing what would happen later. They didn't paint their room, they spray painted it. Not with any vulgar or even gang symbols, but spray painted it. The parties continued, but now they let their guests sign the walls in various Sharpies. This was the moment I realized was the time. I ended up taking pictures of the room on Snapchat and saved them to my camera roll. I knew that my apartment complex wouldn't do anything about the parties and could even blame me for the underage kids. Plus, the items I stored in the common areas were fair game according to legal terms about a shared space. I first speak with the building manager about the parties. I was right. There isn't anything I can do but call the cops. I can complain all I want about the condition of the house my roommates cause and the theft and damage of my belongings, and they won't do anything. They didn't even seem bothered when I spoke to them about 4 of us living there, not being on the lease. The other one that was on my side was chill, and I didn't have a problem with. As long as rent was paid on time, it seemed they weren't going to do anything. After all this, I pull out my camera roll and tell this nice lady to scroll as long as she wants, as I took about 15 pictures on just the one room. She gets mad and starts babbling on and on about gang graffiti, and she won't have it. I knew there were no gang symbols whatsoever on the walls, just dumb kids, but it didn't look good. I didn't correct her and reminded her that the rooms in question were the ones where they weren't even legal tenants here. I locked as much as I could remember to grab of my things from the kitchen in my bedroom beforehand, and was headed straight to work, so I didn't get to see the devastation as 2 office workers evict them in hours. They weren't the legal tenants and had clearly stayed over the 7-day guest limit. They had to pack up as much as they could and were out by the time I got home from my shift 10 hours later. I got a lot of hateful and threatening messages from the GF of one of them. I don't remember the exact words as this was a few years ago, 2016, and I didn't save it for more than a year. I did save them once she started threatening me with stalking and physical harm. I stayed polite and neutral in my responses in case I would need to take them to court. They did get one small revenge in that I remembered to lock up my pots. But in my hurry, I forgot the lids. They stole my lids to all cookware, even my crock pot. They also took all my food they could grab and put it in the now topless crock pot with all of my spices too and left it on. I'm not sure what liquid was used and I don't ever want to know. But I ended up paying the rent of a 1-bedroom for 4 bedrooms when the last roommate's lease ended a few months later. The rooms were leased individually. Also, the now former roommate's friends that were on the lease had to come in clean and repaint the walls white. Do you know what happens when you put water-based white paint over red and black colored permanent marker? He eventually hired a guy to make it look right. I heard it took 9+ layers in some areas and others were entirely spackled. That's not right, but it was a special paint that wouldn't let the ink from the marker bleed through. Over and was super thick. I felt bad for the original leaseholders as they were now stuck with the damages, had to repaint, and still had to pay rent on this apartment. I had met with and was cool with them. Even tried helping one guy paint a bunch and told him I had no beef with him. I apologized the way things worked out and he wasn't happy with me but also didn't blame me. I reason it with they knew they were breaking the terms of their lease and exactly who their friends were when they didn't transfer the lease. If they hadn't repainted the room the way they did, the complex manager wouldn't have done anything. TLDR. My roommates don't respect me or my belongings, so I take the time to befriend them and use what I learned to get them evicted. They had to move in a matter of hours. Edit 1. I got a few comments the title was my TLDR. First of all, don't want to read, don't click it. Secondly, I hope this one is better. Edit 2. Someone made an excellent point that the bathroom is the most obvious place to dispose of human waste. My point that I didn't get across was that there was no flushing involved and a few times several people's worth of excrement and/or vomit would be in the toilet when I returned home. Plunging would work sometimes, other times the clog would have to be removed manually. Since it was my half of the apartment, I had to remove the clog before I could do my business. Not the best thing to see first thing in the morning. The revenge was really masterclass, and it was executed perfectly. OP roommate got the consequences of their actions immediately, and the best part of the revenge was that they had to clean the apartment before leaving. The revenge was truly satisfying. Story is from Ethan Ralphus Fat. Take my tips and pay me below minimum wage. See what happens. Apologize in advance for the walls of text, but this has layers. So this all happened years ago when I was still in college. I worked for a delivery joint. The company seemed super cool because they provided vehicles instead of forcing you to beat down your own car. Huge perk, right? Well, in this case, no. The owner of the company used this as justification to take a percentage of the driver's tips. Often this would result in an employee making below minimum wage. If you made below minimum wage, you would have to come and pick up your check in person and sign a document attesting that you did make minimum wage due to undocumented cash tips. or some such nonsense. Now, this was a problem for two reasons. Number one, in the state I was in, employee tips belonged to the employee unless part of an employee tip pooling agreement. This was plain as day on the Department of Labor website, so that 20% gouge was already crossing a line. Number two, you cannot just handwave and/or force employees to say they made above minimum wage. So pretty shady shit, right? Now, most people would see this situation and run for the hills, which probably explained the delivery driver turnover being so high. I, on the other hand, saw the potential. See, I am pretty well versed in labor law and decided that I was going to ride it out. I wanted to see how long they would keep this shit. Here and there, I would make comments to the managers about the legality of their practices and was often told, "Our lawyers said it's okay, so it's okay." Would love to meet these lawyers one day. So I patiently waited for a year, documenting every red cent they took from me and encouraging the other drivers to do so. Every new driver that came through that door got a little powwow with me, and I would give them the skinny. Unfortunately, my plan must have leaked, because sooner than later, the joint decided to fire me after making up 3 bogus infractions. If you're interested in those, ask, and I'll explain in an edit. This wasn't a problem, though, as my plan was already in action. See, in this state, unpaid wages collect interest. So what was $20, $40 a night, 5 nights a week, over 1 year? Quickly became a decent sum. So I began collecting the names of current and previous employees whom had been screwed over by the company and collected their documented data, then sent it off to the Department of Labor. At the end of the day, it took a couple months, but the company was eventually required to pay a decent chunk of change to all parties and a pretty hefty fine on top. Overall, I believe it came out to a little under $100K. I wasn't done, though. See those shady little documents they had us sign claiming we made over minimum wage affected how the company was reporting its payroll tax. The IRS eventually came in and hit them for a ton of back taxes, and I received a small portion of the settlement. The IRS used to pay people who tipped them off. Don't know if they still do. Finally, I was increasingly aware of the company's under-the-table agreement with their health inspector, which I decided to go ahead and tip off to the health department. This resulted in even more fines and a temporary closure for the joint. Altogether, it ended up costing this dumb little delivery joint a ton of money just to stay open, all because they wanted 20% of their drivers' tips. The moral here is this: know your labor laws. It's degenerates like these whom profit off the ignorance or fear of a workforce. The more you know about your rights, the less idiots like these will be able to survive in the wild. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. Edit 1. Holy shit. I did not expect this to blow up. To address a few things. The infractions that led to my termination and their bull nature are down in the comments. Hopefully, they are not buried. I also wanted to address something I saw in the comments quite a bit. If you are in a situation that does not seem right, document everything. Keep a little black notebook and write down everything. The most important thing you can do to protect yourself from nonsense in the workplace is document, document, document. If you are ever in question of something, be it disability rights at work or earnings, you can always contact your state DECO branch or DOL branch. They will gladly help you figure out what is and isn't proper. Don't be a person who gets taken advantage of by bad employers. Only by fighting back will they ever learn their lesson. Thanks again for all the questions, and thanks to you fine folk who found this worthy of an award. I probably won't edit again because the rules of the subreddit say to not make a lot of edits. If there is reason for a big one though, I will go ahead and make one. The revenge was masterclass and executed flawlessly. The careful documentation, patience, and strategic reporting led to a complete takedown of the company's shady practices. The revenge was really cool and satisfying. The next story is from Garmstrong 318. IT manager leaves business and does his own right to be forgotten. Edit and disclaimer. I am not the person in this story. I am repeating from memory what was told to me by my friend who is the subject, or Steve of the story. I may not have the timings right, What was exactly said? Please understand I was told this some time ago. Also, I'm not an expert of what he did or whether it's right or wrong. Again, I am repeating from memory. Finally, please don't PM me having a go about it being fake or what mistakes I've made. I'll just block you. Back to the post. First off, I'm on a phone, so please excuse bad grammar and missed autocorrections. Second off, this isn't about me, but a friend who I've known for years. Third, this is in the UK, where we have a legal right and process in which we can force a company or entity to remove anything related to us. It's called GDPR, General Data Protection Regulations, and RTBF, Right to be Forgotten. Admins, I'm going to use RTBF instead of writing the whole thing out once or twice, please be nice. So into the story. My friend, we shall call Steve, worked for a company for over 10 years as their IT manager, in charge of the whole system. He had worked his way up from lowly desktop support right to the very top. He was also very into doing everything by the book and within the law. No underhanded shenanigans. The company had recently gone public, shares listed on the stock exchange, and as such needed a director of IT. Steve applied, and was pretty much a shoo-in until he was told the new CEO, the original owner who was pretty much forced to go public by the other two shareholders, had taken his shares and sold them and moved on, had overruled HR and hired someone else, spoiler nepotism, and he shrugged and said, well, at least they will take away most of my paperwork, allowing me to do more work. Oh, how wrong he was. When the new IT director arrived, let's call him Tom, he basically kicked Steve out of his office and into a desk in the main office and did nothing except piss about. Steve found out it was the CEO's nephew who he dotted on. Fast forward 3 months and Steve is pretty much burned out. The nephew had fired his 2 very capable assistants and replaced them with buddies who did nothing, leaving Steve to look after around 400 PCs plus associated servers and network equipment all by himself. He was getting fed up. All the while, the Tom kept ordering him to do weird things like reinstall Windows all on PCs or order him a gaming rig for the office. In one case, go to his house to set up a home network. The final straw came when Tom had got the CEO to cancel Steve's bonus for not meeting all requests made of him. Meanwhile, he buddies, Dick and Harry, got massive bonuses and rewards for their hard work picking up the slack. Steve decided at this point to start looking for a new role. It just so happened he had kept in touch with the old owner who had started a new business and after hearing of his woes had offered him a new job at his much smaller company of the same wage. It was also a much shorter commute, and he got a whole new office and nice set of benefits. Steve, of course, took the offer up, but also decided to plot his revenge. Steve handed in his 3-month notice to the HR dept and began his leaving process, sending emails to the Tom detailing all passwords and processes, plus introducing him to suppliers and whatnot. He also put on the Exchange server a scheduled task to run a batch file 1 week after he left. He also had one of these on the AD server and file storage servers and the backup storage servers. What this batch file did was open PowerShell and run commands to delete anything he was the author of, if a file, or was last saved by him, and also to delete any emails sent to him or by him. He also told Microsoft he was leaving this company and moving on to a new company on the specified date. More on this later. Steve dutifully carried out his final tasks, said goodbye, and as he last act a week before he left, he gave HR a typed-up letter stating his wish to invoke the GDPR RTBF regulations, and he wants all paperwork he created deleted and the only information left for legal purposes and HR reasons, i.e., pay slips, etc. On his final day, he signed out, handed his laptop in, and left graciously, even buying people drinks that evening at the local pub near the company. He was told by HR his request was completed the following week, but they had to retain certain info, HR docs and pay slips for tax reasons, which was fine. Fast forward 2 months. His old CEO rings him up in a panic as things are falling apart. Updates haven't been happening. He can't find any details for suppliers or how to do certain roles. He also had a huge bill from finance as all their licensing costs have gone through the roof. New staff kit is all wrong. Steve kindly explains that he was fed up with Tom doing nothing and hiring his buddies, Dick and Harry, who also did nothing, or worse, made rookie mistakes he was left to fix. He also explained how the cheap license costs were because, as Steve had a lot of qualifications from Microsoft, he got discounts on products. Now he has left, they can't receive them as he is using that privilege at his new place. He also explained the RTBF, right to be forgotten, request saying IT director had 3 months to save the info he emailed before it was deleted. CEO then begged him to allow access to the discounts, but Steve said no, he doesn't do stuff like that. Perhaps he should get Tom, Dick and Harry trained up? He also said maybe instead of hiring your nephew to do a director's role, maybe he should have been hired at the bottom to work his way up, not fail his way down. Steve hung up and has asked kindly not to be contacted again via email through HR. The new job is going great and Steve is enjoying it a lot, from what I hear. Lesson of the story, don't commit nepotism or hire buddies and expect good results. FYI, names have been changed to protect identities. I also don't know the name of the CEO, so I'm leaving his name as such. Edit. As someone pointed out, Steve didn't use the GDPR RTBF request in the right way. I don't personally know much about it, so couldn't comment. But it was a means to an end. Wow. It was a perfect revenge and a bitter lesson for the CEO who gave priority to his inept nephew over an IT expert. The CEO got what he deserved. The revenge was really satisfying and cool. The next story is from Unicorn Rainbow 6166. Sweet, sweet revenge. So for starters, this is from about 2 years ago now. I used to work at very well-known pizza chain restaurant. If Scooby-Doo could say it, it would have called Romanos. I first started out there as just a cashier and would just do the normal stuff, running the register and placing orders. I eventually learned how to make the pizzas. Over time, the store manager wanted to promote me to shift runner. For those who don't know what that is, it's a step below assistant manager. So when I promoted, I'd be in charge of running the shift and delegate roles for the shift and tell employees when they could leave. Anyways, getting off topic, while I was working there was a guy who started there that had worked there before. When he was there before, he was an assistant manager. He left one day during a busy evening when the store was slammed with orders and customers. He apparently got too stressed out and couldn't handle it anymore. So 2 years later, he comes back, but now as a delivery driver. When he first started for the second time, I didn't know who he was and I had never met him before that. He seemed nice. At first, after a few days, he kept trying to be the person in charge. I had to put him in his place a few times when I was running the shift. Now, I wasn't on the best of terms with the store manager. We had a few blowouts here and there, mostly from him breathing down my neck when we were really busy. I snapped at him and told him to back off and let me do my damn job. So when I went to him to tell him about the delivery driver, we'll call him Brad, was trying to act as a manger, he didn't seem to really care. All right, whatever. I was talking to the one assistant manager that I was friends with. We'll call him Chad. I had told him the deal, and he told me to just tell him off. The next shift I worked with Brad, he again tried acting as the manager. I told him he isn't an assistant manager anymore, and he's driver and needs to stop as I'm the one that's in charge of the shift. He huffed and walked away from me. Everything was fine for a while. Well, one day I was sitting in the office taking care of a few things on the computer, and in comes Brad. He starts talking to me about an order and just messing around with me. As I'm finishing up on the computer, he kneels down, making it look like he's picking something up off the floor, so I don't pay him any mind. Next thing I know, he's jabbing a finger into my breast. I froze, unsure of what to do. A million things ran through my mind in a split second. Now, before I continue on, I should note, this isn't the first time to happen to me in my life. When I was in high school, a guy thought it would be funny cool to grab my breast as hard as he could. One day, we were on the bus. In the end, I beat the living hell out of him. It took a few people to keep from doing some real damage. He then got expelled from the school. A year or two later, I had moved, and a similar situation happened on the bus again. This time, I didn't get a chance to do anything, because the school bus pulled up to his stop and he ran off the bus. Got him suspended from school, and his parents apologized to me, along with making him apologize as well. There's some other issues, but you get the point. So anyway, he jabbed my breast hard, and I froze. All those times I had that happen to me flashed through my mind. I got up and I went out, back slamming the door hard. I was pacing back and forth for a few minutes. I didn't know what to do, didn't know what to think. I was shaking from being utterly pissed off and from a feeling I couldn't recognize. Now this is the kicker. He comes out acting like nothing happened and telling me how I need to keep the back door locked because that's how the place got robbed before, 4 years ago, by the old store manager's son. Well, the conversation went a little like this. Me, I don't give a f***. Leave me the f*** alone and go the f*** back inside. Brad, don't yell at me and curse at me. Me, dude, you really do not want to f*** me right now. Go the f*** back inside now. I'm not going to say it again. Brad, and what are you going to do if I don't? So before I can say another word, Chad comes out because he hears me yelling at Brad. When he sees how red my face is, he gets Brad back inside and then comes to check on me. At this point, I'm sitting in my car crying and shaking because I was so mad and so upset. I explained to him what happened. I lived with my mom at the time, and he told me to call her. So I did. I told her what happened, and she told me to call the store manager and tell him that something needs to be done about Brad. So I called the store manager, and this is the conversation. Me, hey, so I wanted to let you know that Brad was very inappropriate and sexually assaulted me. Blah, 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 you know the story. Store manager, oh my God, you guys seriously act like children. You all need to grow up. Me, what? Are you being serious right now? I need to grow up? Dude, one of your male employees assaulted me. Store manager, whatever, I'll take care of it. Bye. So when he said he would take care of it, he meant, I'm going to smack him on the hand and tell him that's not nice and send him home for the night. Okay, fine. I take it a step further and call the district manager. He doesn't answer, so I left a voicemail telling him that I needed to discuss something with him in regards to Brad and that if I didn't receive a phone call back, I was going to press charges on Brad. Never got a call back. So I take it another step further. I decide to file a police report, got my statement written up and had a court date set. Now mind you, the day he got arrested, we were all working. Myself, Chad, Brad, and store manager, plus a bunch of others. When the cop that I had given my statement to came in and arrested him, the look on Brad's face was amazing, and the look on store manager's face was priceless too. Store manager kept asking the cop why he was arresting Brad, and the cop said that he wasn't at liberty to tell him, and that if Brad would like to say, then he could tell him. Well, B was released a couple hours later, and turns out the district manager bailed him out. I was livid. So Brad came back to the store and told store manager what happened and why he was arrested. Well, I got sent home early because of the issue. I was told neither Brad nor myself would be allowed to return to work until after the issue was resolved in court. Well, my mum worked next door, and guess who she seen back at work the next day, having a jolly old time with store manager and district manager? You guessed it, Brad was back at work already. I call up the district manager and ask why Brad is allowed back, but I'm not. He spews a bunch of BS about how I have a toxic relationship with store manager, and that's why I'm not allowed back, and then offers me to work at a store over an hour away from me, not guaranteed the same position and pay. I told him to shove the job up his ass and to f*** off with that bull, and hung up on him. Court day comes, I show up and head over to my lawyer and my support lady that was there. The hearing gets underway, and the verdict, not guilty. Great. If only I had gotten this guy who we'll call Zach to come, not his real name for privacy reasons. Remember how I said Brad used to work there a few years ago? Well, that's when Zach was there. Zach was 16 then, and Brad was 32. He told Zach to get down on his knees and to suck Daddy's balls. If Zach had come to the hearing, I could have gotten a guilty verdict, but because I had no proof of what he did, he got off free. Well, this is where my revenge takes place. My entire family found about what happened, and I legally couldn't take to social media for legal purposes, but nothing ever said my family couldn't. Little did Brad, store manager, and district manager know, my family had a lot of connections and ties in the community. Within a day, everyone in the town, and in surrounding towns too, found out what had happened. Well, needless to say, they lost a lot of business. Rominos fired district manager, store manager, and Brad. They aren't ever allowed to work or come into any of the stores ever again. On top of that, somehow, in the midst of things, someone in town found out that the DM was cheating on his wife and told her. She divorced him and got everything. Everything could have been fine had DM called me back, or even just sided with me. But nope, he wanted to side with a pedophile predator. In the end, I still came out on top. TL, doctorate employee, sexually assaults me, district manager and store manager protect him. Store gets boycotted, store loses sales, higher-ups find out what happened, the three of them get fired and blacklisted from all stores. District manager's wife, in the midst of everything, gets told by a local boycotter that he's been cheating on her. She divorces him and gets everything. The revenge was really cool and satisfying. Ignoring sexual harassment in the workplace is not a joke because it is a crime and can lead to many other crimes. OP did a wonderful job by sharing the story and ultimately getting the chain boycotted. Kudos to OP for standing up for herself. The next story is from AE2AW. Hippity hoppity, this is no longer your property to manage. After graduating college, my girlfriend and I moved to a new state where she was accepted into an engineering program. We found a lovely garden apartment-style complex that advertised 100 Mbps internet speed included in the price among a few other amenities. When we met the property manager, he seemed strict but well-mannered, nothing out of the ordinary. Until we signed the lease. The first problem. Suddenly, walking into his office was not allowed without an appointment. I had come by to ask a question, saw him browsing social media, and figured he was as available as he made himself to us when we first came by, unannounced, to view a model apartment. Nope. He refused to answer my question and asked me to make an appointment via email. The second problem. The terms of our lease included an attachment to complete within 48 hours of accepting the keys that details all discrepancies within the unit. We submitted the attachment via email around the 40th hour. The property manager responded that the terms recently changed from 48 to 24 hours, and since we had passed 24 hours, we would be held liable for all found damages. When citing our copy of the lease, which explicitly stated 48 hours, he informs us that we signed an outdated copy and would need to make an appointment to come by the office and sign a new lease. The third problem. The internet speed was not 100 Mbps as advertised. It was less than 15 Mbps off peak and about 5 Mbps on peak. We again contacted the property manager to complain, but were referred to make an appointment. The fourth problem. We made an appointment to address the previous three problems. During this meeting, and after I finished voicing our issues, the property manager leans forward and says, "There are other communities in this neighborhood that may be more accepting of people like you and your girlfriend. You're welcome to break the lease and leave." People like you and your girlfriend? I had thought he was referencing our no-nonsense response to his nonsense, daily communication, scheduling multiple meetings to address these issues, etc. But my girlfriend believed he was speaking towards our skin colors. Her, a black woman, and myself, a white man. My girlfriend jokingly told me to check my privilege before getting serious and explaining to me that we were experiencing discrimination at the very least. The solution? I did some research and discovered the property manager worked for a larger organization that owned several complexes throughout the country. I found their director of human resources on LinkedIn and made a connection. I then emailed her copies of all email correspondence, screenshots of the lease, pictures of the internet speed flags advertised by the road, and more screenshots of online speed tests. We further noted his comment and the implications behind it. The Human Resources Director replied within a few hours and promised us she would look into the issue. About 2 days later, the property manager called and asked us to come by his office at our convenience. We showed up near the end of the day and sat down across from him. He then proceeded to ask us if we would be willing to write a letter stating we accepted his apology, despite not yet offering said apology, and in return he would credit us a month's rent, accept our damages attachment, and promise to have the ISP on site within a week to assess the internet issues. We declined. He got personal with us and revealed his job may be at stake and asked us to reconsider. My girlfriend leaned forward and said, "There are other communities in this neighborhood that may be more accepting of people like you. You're welcome to leave." The property manager was replaced in a week with a super sweet older woman who not only gave us all the things the original property manager had promised, the 1-month credit, accepting the damages attachment, and then further scheduling maintenance to fix said damages, having the ISP assess and upgrade the internet to promised speeds. But she also made it clear her office was always open for anything we may need. I looked up the old property manager about a few months later on LinkedIn. Still unemployed? The revenge was truly masterclass, and it was executed strategically. People who discriminate deserve the same consequences. These people must be permanently blacklisted from getting jobs. OP and his girlfriend did a wonderful job. The next story is from Interesting Spite, 8260. All she had to do was nothing. TL, DR. I quit a job I otherwise adore to escape a toxic manager. Co-workers reorganized the chain of command to get me to stay. Manager ended up demoted. Context. Names and some details changed for privacy. I'm on mobile, etc. Players, me, who is not out at work. Manager, Josh, Lady Catherine, around 60. Managing partner, Bennett, around 50M. My partner, Gardner, 47M. Partner I'm babysitting, Bingley, 44M. My friend Josh, co-worker, was Charlotte, around 30F. I am a professional attorney wrangler for a big legal firm. If you've watched Suits, I'm Donna, if she was wound tighter than a child's music box. As a legal admin, I have to keep a tremendous amount of information straight. Every county in every U.S. state has their own court system, their own rules, and their own idiosyncrasies. I have 5 attorneys on my team. Despite the TV shows, it's pretty unusual for a lawyer to have a special secretary all their own unless they are very important, so 5 is a solid number. Because of the nameless death that took over the world last year, a secretary that left in January 2020 has not been replaced yet, and I've been babysitting one of the partners, Bingley, in the meantime. It's been a fun learning opportunity as Bingley works for an entirely different region and type of law than the rest of my team. Also, he has a case where a truck exploded, was empty, which is awesome. Story: my manager, Lady Catherine, is the worst. You know the type? She plays favorites, her best loved word is no. She must be involved in every conversation because she is just that important and necessary. We don't get along because I am a stubborn know-it-all who's been proven right a few too many times. Highlights include forbidding me from using the same resources other admins had access to on her orders, including backup admins when my workload was too big, and then denying my overtime requests. I literally had no way to do my job some days. It's worth noting that the reason Bingley's secretary left was specifically because of Lady Catherine. In fact, 4 additional admins quit over the year explicitly because of her. Anyway, at this point, I'd been working with Bingley for almost a year. It was November 2020, and we'd settled into a pretty good routine. I'd gotten used to filing pleadings in a different state and no longer needed to double-check all my work for nuance. Because law still operates in the Stone Ages, a few US states still require hard copy filing. Anything we want the judge to read has to be sent by actual mail, on actual paper, to arrive in the judge's actual hands. It's a pain. Most states let you file electronically, but whatever. Bingley mostly only has cases in one of the hard copy states. Lady Catherine, in her excessive wisdom, butted in uninvited and instructed me to include a cover letter when mailing a new filing. This confused me, as I had been filing for almost a year, and no one, including the admin who originally trained me, had mentioned a cover letter. I told her this, and she basically told me to suck it up. I called the court admin to make sure I wasn't crazy and that I hadn't ruined a year's worth of filings, and the court admin literally laughed and said to please not include a cover letter ever. So I didn't. Imagine my surprise when Lady Catherine called me, writing me up for insubordination. Even knowing the court rules and the judge and the court admin explicitly said to not send a damn letter, she was right because she is always right and I am. And I quote, a disrespectful little shit and she was tired of me. A warning went into my employee file, pending disciplinary measures. The next day, she emailed my team telling them to reduce my score on my yearly review, as she knew I had been rated too highly for what my abilities really are. It felt to me like she was preparing to fire me by creating a history of poor performance. Well, if you're so tired of me, Madam Manager, I can leave. Within a week of looking, I found a new position. Now, here's the issue. I love my team. This is the best work team I've ever been on. We take each other seriously and we genuinely love each other. A lot of times admins get pushed around because we don't have fancy degrees, but not here. Calling in to quit, I cried. I cried a lot. I cried to the point that one of the partners, Bennett, asked if I wanted a counteroffer. I said no, because that wouldn't solve anything. He asked what I meant. I told him. I told him about the write-up. I told him how she was trying to falsify my employee review after it had been submitted. I told him the reason 5 admins had left. I told him about how I wasn't allowed to ask for help. At this point, I had given myself hiccups from weeping, and one of the partners on my team, Gardner, was calling him asking if he and his workload were the reasons I was leaving. So Bennett let me go do other things, like day drink and create a shrine out of legal forms. I thought it was the end of it, until a friend in another office, Charlotte, called me asking WTF I was doing. She doesn't have time to train someone into being the new me, and I was the only admin she actually trusts in my office, so why was I leaving her all alone? I told her. And she told Gardner. And together, they plotted. First, Charlotte is the manager in her office, so she is on equal footing with Lady Catherine. They also report to the same person. Charlotte called the district manager and told him that Lady Catherine was driving admins away and that the most recent quitter, me, was the only person who knows how to do a lot of the work on my teams, and my loss was a serious blow. Apparently this is true, which is both heartwarming and terrifying. Meanwhile, Gardner called up a fellow partner and told her that his world would collapse in on itself if I left. He would go to the nearest bridge and jump off it, which would be pretty impressive in a landlocked state. They had to do something. I got a call the next day from Bennett, saying they had a counteroffer they were really hoping I'd take. Basically, instead of Lady Catherine, I would report directly to Gardner. Lady Catherine would be forbidden from interfering with me without first asking Gardner for his permission. This solved the issue, and I got to stay with my team, so I happily accepted. I thought the debacle was over. The debacle was not over. Unbeknownst to me, after looking at the evidence, exit interviews, emails, memos, Bennett put Lady Catherine on a performance improvement plan and she did not get an end-of-year bonus OR raise. Turns out I had been absolutely correct. Lady Catherine's behaviour and treatment had been the explicit cause that 6 secretaries quit in less than a year. I got a call last week from Charlotte. I figured she wanted to gossip about co-workers or rant about how a shared client is a big ol' headache, but it was actually to give me a heads up. Lady Catherine had been stripped of her management duties. I no longer had any contact with her, which was great, but it also meant I didn't see that her behavior had actually doubled down on the admins, unfortunate enough to still be under her thumb. She had missed every single one of the benchmarks on her performance improvement plan. Charlotte had called me to ask my opinion on who should be the new manager, as I know everyone, and she was helping cover some things as an outside manager. Now, I know some of you are thinking, yes, become the manager and fire Lady Catherine. But I am not a sadist. I want to stay on my team and do what I do best, which is being a cheerfully annoying, respectful little shit. I told her one of the more senior admins would probably need some guidance, but would be amazing at it. No one has to deal with Lady Catherine anymore. She is now a mere paralegal and not anyone's manager at all. If she had just left me alone and not interfered where she wasn't needed, none of this would have happened. All she had to do was nothing. Edited for clarity. Edit FAQ. Holy moly. You all, I'm so happy people think I'm funny. I'm going to print out your comments and staple them to my mom's forehead like, see? The internet laughs at my jokes. Thank you so much for the gold and silver. I'm super excited and honored, but don't waste your actual money on my silly story. Why wasn't Lady Catherine fired? A. I have no idea. My best guess is she's really great at another part of her job or has a valuable qualification. That or she's extorting someone. I will absolutely update if I find out for certain. There are bridges in landlocked states. A. It's just a silly throwaway joke, but I'm from the San Francisco area originally. When I say bridge, I think Golden Gate, which does go over the ocean. I'm new to the middle part of the US and I'm still learning your weird claustrophobic topography. Where are Bennett's managerial skills here? A. Look, I picked Bennett as his name for a reason. He's a great dude, super smart and funny, but he tends to ignore problems instead of solve them. Wait, how many secretaries quit? Do you know how numbers work? A. I absolutely do not, thank you for asking. My math does check out here though. 4 nameless secretaries, plus Bindley's former secretary plus me. I stayed, but I also quit. I'm a conundrum. 6 pissed off admins. Aha. Bennett, if you're reading this, this is why I turned down the accounting duties. So, who actually got revenge here? A. Charlotte IMO. I wasn't sure what Reddit to post this to, but pro-revenge is my favorite, so I tried it out. I briefly chatted with a mod who agreed. So here it is. Pride and Prejudice. A. Austin was a genius, and you can't convince me otherwise. The revenge was perfectly satisfying and executed with precision. Lady Catherine's relentless interference backfired, leading to her demotion and loss of authority. The story was a tale of the satisfying karma. The next story is from Spec 97. HOA member doesn't know the rules as well as he thinks. Obligatory on mobile, and while English is my first language, I suck at it. This story primarily takes place between me and neighbor, who is a member of my community's HOA. Sorry if it's a bit long. As a bit of background, me and my 3 roommates moved into a housing community that is basically just a bunch of cookie-cutter townhomes. All of these homes have garages that open onto streets that wind through the community. This is important later, with your front door opening to a path on the other side of your house. There are also some free parking spots on the edge of the community where there are no houses. When we first moved in, we quickly found out that parking could be a bit of a pain during the day, especially when people had guests during the weekend. Now my roommates and I, admittedly, have more cars than the average family. Because we usually have to commute for work, we each have one. We try to make parking easier by using the garage, but we all have tons of sporting equipment, so we can usually only get one car in the garage. When all the parking in all the free spots is full, we'd just park our cars right up against the garage and leave them there during the day or overnight. We'd seen other neighbors do it, and it still left ample room for people driving on the street to get by. Well, one day neighbor come up while my roommates and I are in the garage organizing some stuff and tells us that we can't park there overnight as it's against community rules. Before we had a chance to respond, he added, "And if you do it again, I will personally make sure you're towed." His first comment was pretty reasonable. We'd just moved in and didn't know that rule. But his second comment really just made him sound like an ass and wasn't necessary. One of my roommates simply responded that we didn't know, as we'd just moved in and we wouldn't park there overnight anymore. Well, neighbor, clearly trying to assert his dominance, responded with, "Good. You better not, because I'll be watching." Well, from then on, we did follow those rules. If we parked in front of our garage during the day, we would make sure to move before we went to sleep. This worked out for a while until one faithful day. One of my roommates stopped by quickly after work to grab some dinner and clothes before heading to his girlfriend's. This was around 7 p.m., so he just parked up against the garage, as it would be quicker than the parking spaces. Plus, it was early enough that he didn't think he'd get towed. Around 8 p.m. he went to head out, and his car was gone. Guess who was there, though? Neighbor standing right outside. Immediately, he said to my roommates, "Told you we're going to get towed if you parked here again." SN and my roommate argued for a bit before my roommate came back inside and calls the car lot. Well, it ends up they're closed, so he'll have to get his car in the morning. The kicker? They're going to charge him an overnight fee. All in all, it comes out to $500, which isn't a small amount of money for us. This neighbor has been an ass to us since we moved in. And even though it wasn't my car that was towed, I took this personally. To make sure we didn't get towed again, we decided to read the community rules, and lo and behold, we found out that the street in front of the garage is actually considered a fire lane, and no one is supposed to park there at any point during the day. Between neighbor treating us like and the fact that we could get him yelling at his wife every night, not a big detail to the story, but just wanted to say, to add to my point that this guy just sucked, I start to plan my revenge. Since quarantine started, I've been able to work from home, and my desk conveniently looks out onto the street between the houses. This means that I can clearly see neighbor's garage. I start to take notice of when he parks his car out in front of his garage. For about 2 weeks, I noticed that he would come home around 1 p.m. and leave again at 2 p.m. On the third week, I decided I would begin the revenge. On Monday, true to his schedule, he stopped by around 1. After about 10 minutes, I gave the tow company a call and said that he was parked in the fire lane and if they could come and remove his car. 20 minutes later, a tow truck rolled up, hooked his car up, and towed it off. About 15 minutes later, neighbor came out, and I could hear him start to yell back into his house, presumably at his wife. He then left and didn't come back until later that evening after he'd gotten his car. Now, it was funny to do this, and I made sure to send snaps to my roommates who don't work from home. But I wasn't done yet. See, this jackass apparently didn't learn the first time, because literally the next day he parks in front of his garage again. What do? Well, the exact same thing as the day before, of course. Again, SN come out, realizes his car is gone, yells at his wife, and then goes to get it. Now, after this time, he is a bit smarter and parks in an actual spot before going in to get his lunch or whatever it is he does there midday. He does this for about 2 weeks before he decides that it's okay to park in front of his garage again. Well, who is still sitting at their desk every day and notices this immediately? Well, me, of course. And being the concerned resident that I am, I immediately call the tow company, and off his car goes again. And again, this is met with yelling. I wish that this had a more satisfying ending, but after this third time, I decided I would stop, because I genuinely felt bad for his wife, who he seemed to do most of the yelling at, as if it was her fault that he was a dumbass. What I can tell you is that it definitely cost him over $1,000. If he hadn't gotten my roommate's car towed, then we wouldn't have ever found that fun little rule. The best part was that a number of my neighbors would have their cars parked there at the same time, and they'd never have their cars towed, which made it all the better when his was. We have had a number of other encounters that, with him, in the time since this happened, and I have another story that involves the actual HOA that I'll probably write later. That one is still ongoing though, so we'll see how it ends up. TLDR. Asshole neighbor gets my friend's car towed, so I get his toad 3 times. Edit, removed initials and replaced them with shit neighbor. Edit 2. By popular decision, I've decided that this story actually won't conclude with me stopping. I've had lots of advice about recording him yelling at his wife and trying to help that situation. I've also been told that I should figure out if he's using HOA funds to pay off these bills. This one may be a bit harder to obtain since we're just renters, but I'll see what I can do. One thing to note is that he has no idea that it's me calling, and I'm trying to keep it that way. I will keep everyone updated with my progress, and if anything new happens. The revenge was perfectly executed and was very satisfying. Neighbor's rude behavior set the stage for this well-planned, satisfying payback. However, OP did a very kid deed at the end when he stopped reporting out of sympathy for his wife. The next story is from I Am Weasel, 93. Depth formed the grave. A story of money. My grandma told me this story recently about how her brother got his ass kicked from the grave. Sorry for the bad English. I do not write it very well, and I have dyslexia, so sorry if I butch the text. So this is the scenario. My grandma comes from a family of 4 girls, 1 boy. My great-grandfather, Henk, was ecstatic with the boy. We will call him Jack. One more important thing is that my great-grandfather ran a very successful company that made high-end clothing and bathroom silks, towels, bathrobes. He made a fortune with his company and made sure everyone who worked for the company got his fair share. He also looked after the family. All his children got an education. All his children got the chance to get their driver's license. It was in the 1960s, so it was a big deal back then. They were the first in my home time with a car, radio, and TV. My great-grandfather treated everyone equal. That changed when his first and only son was born. He already had 4 girls, and now finally a son. The roadmap was laid out for him. He would be the heir to his company. So began the upbringing of Jack. He was, let's say, a kid with a mouth. This wasn't bad pass. The thing was that his father allowed it. Jack got kicked from his first school. Jack got caught for shoplifting. Jack got kicked from his second school. Jack got caught joyriding, and so on and so on. Henk did not sit Jack down and told him the severity of his actions, but he would shrug it and tell his wife, great-grandmother Anna, that it was just childhood quirks. Anna tried to make something out of Jack, but it was a lost cause. Jack became 18, and Henk decided that it was the time to introduce him into the company. The company did better than ever, and the whole family was involved. Jack began at the bottom of the ladder and had to work his way up. This is where Jack began to shine. With shine, my grandmother meant that her brother was not a bright light at school, but he was a hard worker and had a nose for business, not so much for people. Jack was being an ass as per usual and got married to his first Karen. His first wife was a Karen. She wanted to start her own company, and her father-in-law Henk wanted to retire. She pushed Jack to take over quickly and pushed the rest of the family out. Jack listened to her and talked to his father how he was ready and how his sisters and their husbands were tearing the company apart if they would stay in their leadership roles. The thing was that only 1 daughter and son-in-law were involved in the company at this point, 1980. My grandmother oversaw the seamstresses and the quality department, and my grandfather oversaw the financial and the suppliers. Karen wanted full control and started a little fire in the family. She spread a rumor that grandfather stole from the company. I do not know what transpired, but in the end, my great-grandfather bought out all the family, and Jack bought out great-grandfather. The company was Jack and Karen's company now, and things went tits up pretty quickly. Seamstresses quitted, bills were not paid, and Jack had to take a loan from great-grandfather. The family company was barely scraping by, and Karen left Jack because he could not provide for him. It became apparent that Jack could not make it work, and was looking for a way out. After a while, great-grandfather had seen enough, and bought back the remnants of his company and sold it to a bigger company that wanted to expand. This made the wealth he amused even bigger. He did set up different banking accounts for his children and said that if someone was in need, they could take money from that account. He told Jack his cut was smaller as he was the reason he sold the company and that he was let down by the carelessness his son had run his company into the ground. Jack was angry and told his father that he could make it work if he had more time. It remained a sour point between the two of them. Things went well for a while, but Jack married a second time with a woman named Helen. Helen, like Karen, wanted her own business. Jack agreed and took money from the account in order to start Helen's company. The business was a little barbershop and ran pretty well. They were spending their money on luxury and did not save any money. After a while, my grandmother got a call from her little brother Jack if he could store some good in her garage. My grandfather did not trust Jack and told him no, and grandmother did not agree, but they agreed to it. A few weeks later, Jack got caught for possession of stolen goods and drug smuggling. It was not a surprise, but nonetheless a letdown for my great-grandfather Henk. This time he would not help Jack and told him that he would no longer stand behind him. After a few years, Jack got out and was again a divorced man. He married again and divorced another 3 times, and each time he gave these women a business and lived lavishly, new cars, big houses, expensive vacations. He drained his money and robbed his emergency bank account dry. He loaned a lot of money from great-grandfather and so on. In 2013, great-grandfather befell ill. It was clear that he was not going to make it and took his final days in stride. At this time, Jack became very buddy-buddy and started to help great-grandfather sell some stuff. At some point, my grandmother sat down with her father and asked him where the money went for the sold stuff. And great-grandfather told her not to worry about it. He took care of it in his will. After his 95th birthday, he passed away quiet and in peace. After her funeral, they all went to listen to the will of their father, all except Jack, who had given a power of attorney to my grandmother to sign the will in his place. All the children get their fair share, but at the end, the notary public tells them to sign the papers, and the inheritance is completely theirs. At some point, my grandma called my dad. She has inherited some collateral papers, all sorts of papers that stated that someone owned my great-grandfather money. My father said that she has to call a lawyer's office to get the money from these papers. A few days after this call to the lawyer's office, my grandmother gets a call from her brother. Why was she taking his money from the inheritance? My grandmother tells him she has inherited some collateral papers and that she wants to get the money from them. Jack was furious and told her that that was illegal. Jack was wrong. Great-grandfather had documented every penny his son had loaned from him and constructed his will in such a way that the rest of his children could get that part of their money from their money drain of a brother. Also, great-grandfather found out Jack stole from him. You see, Jack was putting the money he made from the sold stuff on his own banking account instead of giving it to his father. After this ordeal, Jack has not contacted my grandmother or his sisters. He has since then paid everything back and has never seen a penny from his inheritance. Great-grandfather has confided in a letter why he did this. He was done with his son. All the lying, the careless things he had done to his company. All the money he had blown and not taking any responsibility. He gave his final lesson to his son from the grave. The revenge was a masterclass and poetic. The grandfather taught a bitter lesson to Jack, and his entitled expectations finally backfired, allowing the family to secure the rightful inheritance. The revenge was truly satisfying. The next story is from Fidel. Screw me? Screw you. I want my money. This is a revenge in multiple parts and apologies up front for the length. About 30 years or so ago, I was 17 and about to head to university. An acquaintance through my parents' church offered me a job working with him, learning to be a pizza chef. Awesome. I'd need money for uni, and I'd already had a stack of jobs, so working hard was nothing new for me, but being a cook certainly was. My experience with Italian was limited to Pizza Hut, so I accepted that at the start I was a liability, not a help. I started work, and to start with, I worked free. Cool, but when it got to the point about 3 months later that I was opening by myself and taking whole shifts by myself, well, I should be paid. I screwed up all of my 17-year-old courage and confronted the owner. Let's call him Nick, because that was his name. He huffed and puffed and tried to tell me how terrible I was, but I stood my ground, and now I'm on minimum wage. Not bad in my eyes at the time. I worked there for another 3 years, through most of my uni degree, often putting in 30 hours contact at uni, 30 hours at the restaurant, and 30 hours of study. It was hectic, but just became the norm. Towards the end, I became a lot more savvy and started researching labor laws, keeping records of my pay packets and end-of-year tax receipts, and realized Nick and other co-owners were screwing me. I wasn't on the correct rate, they weren't deducting tax correctly, and a couple of other accounting oversights. By then, I was working with my, at the time, mate. Let's call him girlfriend creeping dickhead. Girlfriend creeping dickhead. It was Sunday night. The place was packed. I had tickets all the way down my line, and girlfriend creeping dickhead and I were pumped. We had a new boss, who'd just bought into the business, who thought he was the king of the world, because he was now a restaurateur, a right wanker. But after years of having to stay back to cook pizzas on World Cup nights for the boss's friends, or Christmas, NYE, etc., I was sorta used to the grandstanding chest-puffing behavior. The night in question, the new boss would not let me start the second pizza oven. Think a 2-tier oven. I was only allowed the top tier on because it cost too much. So here I am, oven full, 2 pizza chefs running full speed, and we're only falling behind because one oven wasn't enough, and it was starting to cool down from being so full and opened so frequently. New boss gets a couple of tables of mates in. Instead of just asking us to cook some comp garlic bread or whatever, he starts loading up trays himself and putting them in the oven. Not the worst crime, but because he had no idea what he was doing. Every 30s he'd open the oven to check them, cooling the oven down even further, potentially ruining the food we had in there and slowing us down measurably. I had the head chef chewing my ass out as his food was ready to go, but my food on the same tickets wasn't. It was hectic and not fun. This garlic bread bandit had to stop. Me, new boss, stop with my oven. If you want garlic bread, just ask. I'll get it done immediately for you. New boss, what? Huh? Me, you're messing with my oven. You're cooling it down and we're too busy for this. Just tell me and I'll make it. New boss, okay. Did he do it? Nope. He kept on. Cue the same conversation another 2 times. The last time I told him I'd blow my stack if he did it again. You see where this is going? He did it again. Now, after being consistently ripped off and abused, so many kooky stories from that place, for 3 years, my time was up there anyway, and this was the time to do it. I looked at girlfriend creeping dickhead and said, "Yo, we out of here?" He looked back and simply said, "Yup." We stripped our aprons, and in front of the entire restaurant, Pizza Kitchen was in full view of the entire restaurant, threw them on the bench and told new boss, "We quit. All this, all these tickets, all the food in the oven you f***ed up, and your mate's garlic bread. This is all yours now. Good luck." Then we walked out, got some coffees from the baristas, sat in front of the pizza area, and watched him absolutely flounder. He had no idea what he was doing, and there was literally no one else there that could help him. We could see food coming out from the kitchen, but the pizza on the same ticket was taking 20 minutes or more longer to come out. Tables were hopping mad. We could hear the grumblings all around us. I'll admit it was dickish, but undeniably satisfying to behold. That's not the pro-revenge, though. The pro-revenge was that I'd been stealing my timesheet every Sunday night, photocopying it, and then replacing it Monday mornings. I'd been doing that for over a year. I'd also told girlfriend creeping dickhead to do it. Monday I walk in, and Nick was there and was furious at me. As I walking in, you could see his chubby face turn bright red as he bellowed across the restaurant floor. "What the f*** do you think you're doing here? Get the f*** out and never come back." Me, "Nick, we've got to talk. We can do it here or we can do it in your office. But trust me, you want to have this conversation privately." Nick, "Fine. You come with me then," desperately trying to gain the upper hand back, and he storms to his shitty little office out the back. Nick, about how he's going to withhold pay and a whole heap of other illegal hot air. Me. You done? Good. Here, read this. I hand him a print out of an Excel spreadsheet, a stack of photocopied timesheets, a stack of photocopied payslips, printed copied of the wage awards, all of which detail the amount he's ripped me off for. Me? You owe me $6,000. I'll take cash or a check now. Did I mention he and the other bosses had just been simultaneously raided by the tax office and that they and the business were all on thin ice? Yeah, bad timing for Nick the Dick. Nick, spluttering, wringing his hands. But I can't afford it. Look, I'll show you my bank accounts, as he physically starts scrambling to find his bank statements. Me, Nick, I literally don't give a about you, your bank accounts, or your situation. You owe me $6,000. Today. Or I take all of this to the tax office and all of the other relevant government departments that will be very interested in this, because Nick, I have a feeling if you're doing this to me, you're doing it to other staff here as well, huh? As for not having the money, well, again, not my problem, but you just bought a new $60,000 Pajero, so if you have to run that down to the car yard and sell it, again, I don't give a but I get $6,000 today. He literally teared up a little. I'm not sure why, maybe through frustration, rage, or just being screwed by someone he thought way beneath him. But seeing a grown man who's abused you for many years cry at your hands is a pretty beautiful thing to behold as a 20-year-old kid. I got a check that day for my whole $6,000, and yes, it cashed. But the best was walking out of his office with girlfriend creeping dickhead standing there who deadpan just looked him in the eyes and said, "Nick, we need to talk." And in they walked in to do the same thing. $10K he lost that day. The best part? A few of my friends at the restaurant caught wind of the fact that I had enraged him and asked what it was all about. I let them know how they were being screwed, how to take copies of all of their timesheets, and where to find the relevant laws. I know of several other people who did the same thing to him. And that was how I left the hospitality industry and started working in my field of study, never to look back. Hope you enjoyed my Cake Day present to you all. The revenge was perfect, and it was truly executed strategically. OP patiently gathered evidence, waited for the perfect moment, and hit Nick where it hurt most. The best part was when OP's friend did the same, walking away with a hefty amount. The story is from Large-Meat-Feast. Fire us or cut our pay. Enjoy a mass walkout. Not sure if revenge or karma, but it fits revenge, I hope. Back in the early 2000s, I worked for a tech company who offered tech support, on-site support and training to organizations who either didn't want specialized IT staff or could benefit from outsourcing. The company consisted of the 3 directors, a sales department, finance, HR department, and tech department. Tech was further split, with a senior manager, 4 team managers, and each team having 2 section managers. For call center support, where I worked, we had 2 team leaders, 2 senior engineers, 2 normal engineers, and 2 juniors. I was a standard engineer, earning $22K for a job that was worth at least $5K more outside of the low-price area we all lived in. 2006, and I'm still stuck in this job, on the same pay. Conditions are worse than before, with no overtime, no flex time, no financial compensation for industry qualifications, shortened breaks, and no pay rise since I started. To make matters worse, they sold part of the land that the office was on to a developer, and on-site car parking was now for management only. We had to either pay to use the nearby council car park or risk parking on the street. Morale was low, but despite bad pay, it was still good for the area we lived in. One Friday in July, think it was the 21st, one of the senior engineers finds a document that he shares around the private chat app. It's a restructuring plan that the board voted in last week. Apparently, this had to be made available for the company for 3 months before any changes to terms and conditions could be made, so the board gave it a generic file name and tried to bury it in the large staff shared area of the network. One of the directors was selling his shares and moving on, having been headhunted by a large recruitment firm in a nearby city. The two remaining directors had managed to buy most of her shares with a small quantity going outside the company. This was the company response. Most of the document was a typical downsize restructure package with a twist. A few team mergers, staff reductions, and pay cuts spun as if to say that they needed to maximize their profits to put the lost money back into the company. In October, a new contract would be released for all to sign and was generic. In November, the restructure would be announced, and by January 1st, the new structure would be in place. The directors noted that the new contract needed to include clauses for non-competition and for soliciting customers, as these didn't exist except for the sales staff. It also mapped current positions to their new ones and what the new salary would be. I would be down by $5,000 a year, but the twist was that anyone with the word manager in their title would have their pay increased drastically. The team manager's pay jumped from $52K to $65K, for example. By the end of the day, everyone under the rank of team leader had seen this document and was not happy. Over the weekend, I got a text message from one of the senior engineers inviting me to a BBQ at his house. When I got there, most of the tech staff was there, and during the afternoon, we formulated a battle plan. Our revenge. Monday, 24th July, 8 a.m. 26 people in the tech team arrived for work as normal, each with a letter for the senior manager giving their 1-month notice, and all quoting the clause in their contract that states that members of the technical team, with access to confidential company information, must be off-site and on gardening leave the same day as they hand in their notice. No exceptions will be given. Gardening leave is a term used to say that we still work for the company, have handed in our notice to quit, but can't remain on site or using company resources, so must wait out the remainder of the notice at home. We can't start a new job within that period. The net effect was that at 9:30 a.m., the director realized that his entire tech staff had quit and marched to the office floor and started harassing one of the seniors. The senior simply stood, took off his ID badge and swipe card, handed it to the director, and told him, "I've already quit. This is me now sticking to my contract." On cue, most of the staff followed, with one member staying until lunchtime. From what I've been told, directors, senior managers, anyone they could get hold of were on the phones attempting to fix issues. The unsolved open queue went from around 35 to nearly 100 by lunchtime, and naturally the blame was left firmly at the door of those who quit. We were even badmouthed to customers. The day after our notice period expired, the senior engineer welcomed 25 new staff to his new company and had already taken 10 large contracts from the place we used to work for. We all had better pay, not much, but it was better than losing pay, and much better conditions, with an actual career track rather than the whim of the managers. The old company tried to keep afloat for a year, but were losing money on every contract and couldn't afford to employ skilled or experienced people. They closed down in June of 2007, with the owners having to sell personal assets to pay debts, and the two remaining directors declaring personal bankruptcy too. I left the new company in 2010, as the market had changed and more companies were hiring staff than outsourcing, so contracts were harder to find. And I also had some minor medical issues that meant I needed to be near home. New company is still going strong though, having lent more towards web design and development than anything else these days. The revenge was masterclass and flawlessly executed. The team's coordinated resignation and use of gardening leave left the company scrambling, powerless to maintain operations. It really is satisfying and cool revenge. The story is from the male Mary Poppins. Break my phone, you'll pay for the damage. Hello, wonderful people of Reddit. I have a lot of time to myself today. My friend employer is taking the kids out for a walk, and I decided to post my own personal story of revenge here after my friend suggested it. She also insisted on helping with my username, so thanks for that. I was always the kid people picked on at school. The girls would spread rumors about me and the boys would harass me non-stop. See, I'd always known that I wanted to be a nanny. I loved babysitting and looking after kids, so it seemed like a natural career choice for me. I made the mistake of telling this to a girl who I thought was my friend, and she proceeded to tell everyone at school. As this was perceived as feminine, I instantly became the target for bullies. There was one boy who loved to terrorize me. I'll call him Jack for the sake of this story. Jack was awful. He would follow me home whilst throwing things at me, vandalize my schoolwork, call me disgusting names, steal my stuff, cut my hair in class, etc. I was terrified of him. It got to the point where I couldn't sleep from the fear of having to deal with him at school the next day. I blame him and his friends for the anxiety I had, and still somewhat have to this day. I reached breaking point not long after Christmas when I was 15. My family never had a lot of money, but we got by. My mom had saved for ages in order to buy me my first phone. No, it wasn't the newest model, but I didn't care. I was so grateful to have my first phone, and a little guilty that my mom had gone without her new Christmas outfit and had put off fixing her own phone to buy it for me. Once the schools went back after Christmas break, Jack found out about my phone. He took it from me and proceeded to read through my messages, making fun of me for the lack of contacts and telling my mom I loved her, then threw it to the floor and stomped on it in front of his friends. I was furious, upset, and devastated. This dickhead had destroyed something that my mom had worked so hard to buy for me. I started planning my revenge. I knew through the grapevine that Jack's mom was a stay-at-home mom. His dad had a well-paid job, and his mother was quite happy to stay at home with the kids, 4-year-old twin girls. I also knew, however, that she didn't get to go out much as Jack would flat out refuse to babysit, and she was pretty picky when it came to who was allowed to look after her kids. I used to babysit her friend's little boy and was pretty good at it, if I do say so myself. However, for my plan to work, I had to babysit Jack's siblings. I made a few comments here and there to the little boy's mom about wanting to get a few more babysitting jobs so I could save up some money for my mom's upcoming birthday. As luck would have it, the lady recommended me to Jack's mom, since it had been so long since she'd been able to go out with the girls. For the next few weeks, I'd go to Jack's house with the other little boy I was babysitting and look after his little sisters. Despite Jack's awful attitude, his family were all pretty nice. His little sisters were an absolute joy to look after. Jack wasn't usually in the house, but when he was, I could see that it killed him to have to be civil to me. His mom would have flipped out if he'd been horrible to me in front of her or his little sisters. They'd have quickly ratted him out. Once I decided enough time had passed, I put my plan into action. See, Jack was one of those creepy kids that liked to brag about his adult magazine stash in his bedroom. This made him cool to his friends, never understood why TBH. Anyways, every time I'd babysit and put the little ones to bed, I'd sneak into his bedroom and search around. I know this is a massive invasion of privacy, but I was a stupid 15-year-old kid, and I couldn't take his bullying anymore. I eventually found his stash and made a mental note that they were in a bag in his closet. I'd been observant those few weeks, so I knew that Jack's mom and dad had an unopened bottle of vodka in the fridge. They didn't drink a lot, and it was only for when they were going to parties. One night, once the little ones were asleep and Jack was out with his friends, I went to the fridge, opened the bottle of alcohol, and tipped about a quarter of it down the sink. His parents could afford to buy a new one, by the way. If they couldn't, I'd never have done it. And snuck up to Jack's bedroom and the bottle in the same bag as his stash. His parents found out about it not too long later, and, after Jack accused me of taking it, they showed up at my door. They weren't angry because they still didn't know who had taken it, so they asked me some questions. I denied everything, but was polite, and even offered to help them look for it in case it had been misplaced. They thanked me, but told me that it was fine. They'd find it. And, oh boy, did they find it. I was called over the next day to take the little ones to the park for an hour or so, in order for them to have a talk with Jack. They didn't like arguing in front of the twins. It had frightened them. When I got back, Jack was in his bedroom. If the noises were anything to go by, he was crying. It turns out that he'd ratted himself out. His parents found the bottle of alcohol in his room, along with his adult magazines. His mother hated anything like that as she found it to be degrading to women. She humiliated him by gossiping to the neighbors about his unhealthy obsession with sex. He'd denied everything and accused me of planting the alcohol there. When asked why I'd do that, he ratted himself out by saying that it was payback for him breaking my phone. His parents flipped out. They'd had no idea their son was such a bully. They took away his phone, grounded him, and made him sell his games console to pay to get my phone fixed. I'd been saving up the money myself for a few weeks. His face when they made him hand me the money will stay with me forever. His parents questioned me about the bullying, eventually informing my mom as well. I'd hidden it from her and told her I dropped my phone. He got into a lot of crap at school after a few other kids came forward about the bullying they'd endured at the hands of Jack and his friends. A few of them, including Jack, got suspended. Jack's parents even made him got to the door to apologies to the people he'd tormented. I was reluctant to take the money at first, as it was way over the amount it would cost to get my phone fixed, so his parents compromised and told me to take enough to at least cover the repair cost. Needless to say, with the phone repair covered, I managed to get my mom an awesome birthday gift. This is really long and really badly written. I'm not a writer, so please forgive me for any errors. TLDR. Bully at school breaks my phone, so I babysit his sisters in order to frame him for stealing his parents' alcohol. They make him sell his games console to pay for the damages. He also gets suspended from school and made to apologies to his victims. The revenge was absolutely satisfying. It was calculated, clever, and left Jack facing the consequences of his actions in a way he never expected. Not only did he have to pay for the damage to OP's phone, but he also suffered the humiliation of being exposed as a bully, leading to school suspension and a forced apology. The revenge was cool. The story is from Motherhood Est 2017. Won't pick up your dog's shit and then steal from me. Move out then. So I posted this in r/entitled parents, and more than one person suggested I also post it here for you, lovely people. It's quite long. I do apologize. So this happened at the last apartment complex I lived in. Sorry it's so long. My SO and I were renting a ground floor unit at a really nice apartment complex. I wouldn't say it was a luxury apartment or anything, but our ground floor unit had a little patio off the back that led out into a really nice courtyard area with hammocks, a walking path, outdoor fireplace, dog seating area, etc. A lot of people walk their dogs out there, or let their kids play out in the grass, including us. We have a 1-year-old cane Corso. We got her when we'd been living in the unit for about 2.5 months, and she was only 8 weeks at the time. She's a really good dog, and we trained her well. We could let her out to go potty, and she'd come right back, even if there were distractions, people, dogs out. We always stood on the patio and watched her anyways because our pet agreement said we couldn't leave our dog unattended. Then we'd go pick up her poop right away if she pooped. Also part of the pet agreement, as I'm sure is standard at most apartment complexes. We kept a small step trash can outside specifically for her poop bags because we didn't want to throw them away inside. And the only outside trash cans were on the other side of the building, which I agree is super dumb. It really was a small trash can, like the kind you'd tuck into the bathroom between the toilet and the wall. We also had her poop bags hanging on our patio door handle for easy access, so we didn't have to hunt for them every time we needed them. This lady and her kid moved in on the ground floor in our building, 2 units down from us. No biggie. We ran into her one day carrying in groceries, and my SO held open the door for her. She seemed kind of Karenish, but was polite. And her kid, probably 10, 11 years old, didn't look up from his phone, whatever that's pretty typical of kids these days. They also had a dog, a little black and white fluffy thing, super cute, but not trained very well. Don't know what kind of dog, but it was much smaller than our already giant puppy. After about 2 weeks or so, we realized that there were dog turds in the grass right off our patio. We found out the hard way because my boyfriend stepped in it the first time. Luckily, he wasn't barefoot. They were clearly not our dog's turds, as 1. We always picked up her poop right after she went, and 2, they were very obviously from a small dog, not our 70-pound puppy. We'd been in the apartment about 7-8 months at that point and had never had an issue with this, so we figured it was EM's little dog. I wrote her a polite note that basically was like, "Hey neighbor, we noticed that some of your dog's poops aren't being picked up and are right off our patio. Per the pet agreement we all have to sign, we all need to be picking up our own dog's poop each time they go. I'm sure it was an accident and you just didn't notice. So if you could make sure to do that going forward, we'd appreciate it. Your neighbors in Unit TAS." She wasn't home, so I slipped it under the door and went back to my apartment. A couple hours later, this lady is banging on my door and gets really angry with me, insists that it couldn't have been her dog, and how dare I assume. I felt really bad and I apologized immediately, said I didn't mean to offend her, and it must have been someone else. She told me never to bother her with crap like this again and stormed off. I was like, okay. Not 3 days later, I was sitting on my patio with a book enjoying the cool weather when I see their little dog run out of their back door. No one with it. And it comes over to me. I said hello to the pup because I love pups. And then it took a right off patio, ran back home, and scratched the door to be let in. I saw her kid slide the door open enough to let the dog in and then closed it again without coming outside to pick up the poop. I was annoyed because here I saw it with my own eyes that it was their dog, and no one was even watching it when it was outside. So I grabbed a poop bag, picked up the poop, wrote another, less polite note about her kid neglecting to watch the dog or come to check if it had pooped, pick up after it, and dropped the poop bag and the note on their patio right by the door, then went back to my reading. EM was quicker to come by this time and stomped right up to me, waving the note around. Then stated that her kid was just a kid and probably just forgot to check. I said I didn't care. Her kid was old enough to stand outside for 3 minutes and come pick up the dog's poop. She said, well, there's no poop bags, trash cans on this side of the building, and she didn't feel comfortable making her kid walk all the way around the building for that. The next part is my own fault in hindsight. I suggested she put a trash can like mine on her patio and leave their own poop bags handy like we do for our dog. She eyed our stuff, huffed some more, rolled her eyes, refused to do anything about the poop, and walked off. At this point, I was super annoyed. I stalked my patio door for the next couple days as much as I could, just waiting. And sure enough, on day 2 in the evening, when I was about to give up, I see the puppy run outside towards my patio. I whipped out my phone, took some pictures of the dog outside alone, not allowed, and the dog pooping, and then took another phone an hour later of the poop still there, and time-stamped all of them. Then I sent an email to the apartment office people who were always pretty nice, and they responded quickly they would give her a warning about it. And sure enough, this lady comes back again to get mad and yell at me about how petty I was to report them to the office, and now they had a $150 fine for not picking up their dog poop. It's worth noting that these fines were rare. Poo prints were not used at this complex. In order for the office to fine someone for dog poop, they had to have proof it was that specific tenant's dog's poop and that it wasn't picked up. Hence the photos I'd taken and time-stamped. I told her that I had tried to be nice about it with her twice before, and it was her own fault at that point for not abiding by the terms of the pet agreement we all had to sign. Everyone who had a dog, at least. She went off about how she's a single mom and she works during the day and her precious baby can't be expected to pick up after their dog. I told her that a 10 or 11-year-old was plenty old enough to pick up after a dog, and that if they weren't responsible enough, then maybe the kid shouldn't be letting the dog out at all, and she should be the one to do it, or maybe whoever is home with him should be looking after it. She got angry, told me I had no idea how to be a single mom, that her mom stays with him during the day and shouldn't be expected to look after her kid and her dog, and she stomped off again. I expected to hear more about it, but I didn't. The ironic part is, I am a single mom. My kid isn't my SO's, and I raised him alone for 2.5 years before I met my SO. So yes, I do know how hard it is, and I live 1,000 miles from my closest family. So I never even had the luxury of being able to have my mom watch my kid. Over the next couple of weeks, we didn't find any more dog turds off our patio. But we did notice our poop bags were depleting and our trash can be filling up way more quickly than usual. I had my suspicions and wanted to test it. We had recently bought some small security cameras for inside of our apartment for different reasons, and I had my boyfriend set one up outside on the patio. We faced it where it could see our door and trash can, but didn't point to the rest of the courtyard or other people's units. We respect privacy around here. Sure enough, the same evening my boyfriend set it up, I see the kid walk onto our patio, take a poop bag, walk out of frame, and then come back to throw it in our trash can. Okay. Now I'm pissed, but also not trying to fight this lady or her kid. So I moved the poop bags to the inside door handle. It's a glass door so you can still see them, but we always lock our sliding door. Next morning, I hear someone knocking on the back patio door, and I go to see her kid standing there looking annoyed. I didn't open the door. I just spoke loudly enough to ask what did he need. He demanded a poop bag for his dog's poop. I said, "I'm sorry, but these are our poop bags for our dog, and they weren't free for anyone else to use." The apartment provides poop bags in a dispenser near the trash can on the other side of the building. Kid started demanding a poop bag, saying his mum told him he could use ours, slapping his hands on the glass a few times. Trying to scare me? Yes, I'm so terrified of a 10-year-old boy. And finally screaming at me that he's telling his mother on me. I said, "Fine, go ahead. I'll tell her the same thing." Sure enough, a few minutes later, his mom is standing on my patio, also demanding a poop bag for her dog's poop. I denied her a bag and asked her to please step off of my patio as she was making me feel unsafe and uncomfortable. My SO wasn't home. She told me I was a bratty child, I'm 24, and she demanded I let her use my poop bags as I had already told her she could before. I said, "No, I told you to get some yourself and do what I do. Keep them close by and put your own trash can on your own patio. Not use the bags I buy with my own money for my own dog and then fill up my tiny trash can with your dog's poop." I pointed out she could use a plastic shopping bag if she didn't want to buy her own poop bags, or she could use the bags the complex provided on the other side of the building. She kept going off on me, and I finally told her if she didn't leave my patio, I'd call the police as she was harassing me. The apartment office was closed on Sundays, and of course it was Sunday. She acted like she was going to call my bluff, but then my boyfriend got home and walked up behind me to ask what was going on, and she ended up dragging her kid away. Again, leaving the poop in the grass off my patio. So once she was gone, I took another time-stamped picture of the dog poop, downloaded the footage from my security camera of her kid stealing my poop bags and throwing them in my trash can, and the footage from them that morning yelling at me and demanding my bags and my denying them, and emailed all of it to the apartment management. I told them that she made me feel unsafe and uncomfortable in my own home, that she and her child felt entitled to come onto my patio and take my belongings. I also went outside, picked up her dog's poop, looked in the trash can on my patio, and pulled out the bags with her dog's poop. They were significantly smaller than my dog's poops, as I'm sure any dog owners could tell the difference in poops of a 12 Velay dog versus a 70 Libby dog. I went and opened all the bags and dumped the poop straight on her patio right outside the door. On Monday, I heard back from the office lady who said she would take care of it. By Friday, there was a moving truck, and the lady and her kid were moving out. Pretty sure they were evicted or at the very least urged to move before a formal eviction process was initiated. After talking to some of our other, much friendlier neighbors, it turns out we weren't the only ones who had been complaining about her. They'd only lived in the complex for like 2-3 months before they made so many enemies, they were kicked out. Sometimes I think I should feel bad for playing a part in them getting evicted, but honestly, I can't bring myself to feel guilty about it. Not my fault she was a lazy, entitled bitch who couldn't even be asked to get a shopping bag to pick up her dog's I never heard from her about the turds I dropped on her patio, but I like to think she stepped in them without looking and knew better than to come bitch to me about it. Sorry, not sorry. Also, I'm sure they were given more than a week to vacate, as those are the tenancy laws here, but she packed up and left like a bat out of hell. Guess she didn't want to stay somewhere she was clearly seen as an enemy. I don't know for sure that she was evicted or if she was just asked to leave or abide by the lease or what. Office can't give out that type of info, and she and I weren't exactly on speaking terms for her to give me the scoop about it. TLDR, entitled, "Mom lets her dog shit wherever it wants without cleaning it. I tell her to pick up her dog's or make her kid do it. She refuses. Gets a fine from the apartment complex after I send them pics of her dog unattended and the poop not being picked up. She starts letting her kid steal my supplies from my patio. I send video footage and photos to the management, and they end up being kicked out of the complex. The revenge was perfect and executed perfectly. Lazy people, like the entitled neighbor of OP, don't deserve to have pets. They must be treated the way OP treated her. BTW, OP did a wonderful good job by getting the entitled neighbor evicted, and the revenge was really satisfying and cool. The story is from Lime Cherry. Manipulative, power-hungry aunt torments my family for years. Costs her $300,000. Dealt with my manipulative, abusive aunt all my life. Finally got revenge. Players, myself, M late 30s. Sister, 3 years younger. Aunt, older sister to my mother. Mother, single mom, adopted. No blood relation to my aunt. Cousins, 3 total. 1M, 2F. I have good relationships with them now mostly. My estranged father, who had been living several counties over, is pretty much out of the picture by the time my parents got their divorce when I was 9. Due to financial hardship, we were forced to live with my aunt and the nightmare of a household we would soon find ourselves in. My aunt married into Georgia wealth, and you can figure out what that means on your own. She had 3 kids and eventually caught her husband having an affair. It's a huge scandal. She gets the house, the kids, and a fat payout from the family attorney. This is important because my aunt didn't do a damn thing in her life to earn her money, her house, her lifestyle, or basically anything. She was born poor along with my mom. Under her household, she was drunk with power. Years of therapy have allowed me to recognize that certain people, when in a position of power, get a perverse pleasure in ordering others to do their bidding. She was the strictest of authoritarians in every possible way you could imagine. Chores had to be completed by an exact specific time. Vacuuming by 3:45 p.m., dishes by 3:55 p.m. Laundry days for my mother-less kids were Tuesdays, 5:35 p.m., 7:55 p.m. If it was still running, she would shut the power off for the 2 units. As we grew older, her own kids opted to stay with their father for full-time custody, and she had them on weekends. Even they couldn't stand her when she was in charge and in the house. As time passed, she got them less and less, opting for alternating weekends as high school activities took precedence over time with mother. For my sister and I, the large 6-bedroom house was not ours for the taking. My mom had to pay rent as well as rent for 1 bedroom, as that was all she could afford on her salary. We had to share a bedroom until my 2nd year of HS. All the while, there was 1 spare unused bedroom available at all times. My aunt needed this for guests when they stayed over. Not 1 guest stayed there in the 10 years I was under that roof. Finally, the church we attended told my aunt to give up the spare bedroom so my sister can have her own room, as it was unhealthy for 2 teenagers sharing a room together like that. That infuriated my aunt because someone told her what to do in her own household. My sister and I got the brunt of her wrath. As my mom's salary was tapped out, my sister and I had done extra chores like mowing the lawn, trimming the shrubs, cleaning the pool, which we could no longer use without her being outside watching us. My aunt's behavior was becoming more and more outrageous and disconnected from society. For example, she had always snapped her fingers when she wanted to get someone's attention, but it was getting far more frequent, and she would blow up into a tirade if either my sister and I didn't obey. Her own kids tried repeatedly to tell her that the shit she was doing was wrong, but she wouldn't listen. Eventually, they wanted nothing to do with her outside of the home. She was a tyrant there, and repeated intervention to get her to see the folly of her ways would fall on deaf ears. I snapped. All through HS, I had no confidence as a person. I was weak-willed and growing ever distant from friends and society. I say this in all truthfulness and fear, that had circumstances continued the way they had been going, I could very well have taken a gun to myself, or worse, to others around me. I was that bad off. I had just graduated HS and started my 1st semester of community college. I'm 2 weeks into my classes attending from home when my aunt drops a bomb on me. You owe me for this month's rent, the same amount for next month's rent as well. It is the 27th after all. You're an adult now. You're out of HS and working now, so you need to pay rent. The f. I blew a gasket as I yelled back. You can't just suddenly decide to charge me rent just because you feel like it. I need 30 days notice. I have rights. My aunt yelled at me some bullshit excuse that she had discussed this with my mother, and it was decided that I needed to pay my own rent now. In some miraculous backbone move, of which I still have no idea how I stood up to her, I yelled right back at her. If I'm an adult, then treat me like and talk to me about rental agreements. I'll start paying you rent in 30 days starting the 1st. I turned my back to her and walked away with my fists balled tight. I was furious with anger, but I walked away. My aunt saw my fists from behind and screamed bloody that I was going to attack her. No, I wasn't. She snapped her fingers at me repeatedly on my tail to get my attention, but I didn't turn around. I needed to cool off and clear my head. As I turned the corner, she grabbed my wrist hard, yelling, "I'm not finished talking to you." I threw my still balled-up fist forward, keeping with my stride to break her grip as I hadn't stopped my momentum. This caused her grabbing arm to slam hard into the corner of the wall that I had just turned into. She screamed in pain, but I left the house and took off. The aftermath of that incident was that my aunt called the cops on me in an attempt to press charges. She was taken to the hospital and suffered a fractured wrist, and she was put in a cast sling. Don't know, as I never saw it and never inquired further. Her story changed every time she told the cops what happened, while my story was spot on every time. I can still recall that moment down to the smell in the house, where I was facing, the working and non-working light bulbs, etc. Forever ingrained in me. I was kicked out of the house, and I couldn't visit my sister or my mom there at the house again. Fine by me, as I didn't want to see my big aunt ever again. I was happy to meet my mother and sister at the local diner or outlet. We could be ourselves there and not hostages in our own home. Years later, my mom wised up and got out of that abusive relationship with her sister and moved out on her own. She got a temporary nice place, invested wisely, and with the help from the church, got help getting a place of her own. In 2009, after the housing crisis, she bought her own place that she could never have afforded on her own prior to the market crash. But some good came out of it. She wept knowing my sister and her family and myself can come visit any time and stay. Over the years, I've been able to forgive my aunt. Not forget, forgive. I've let go a lot of my anger and hatred toward her that she put me through. When she has no leverage or control over us, she's a somewhat decent person for being a total bitch of a person. My cousins have calmed down, heard my side of what happened those years ago, and know what kind of person I am, compared to what kind of person their mother is. They chose to believe me and know I didn't hit her or strike her or beat her across the face like she continues to claim. The revenge. While I have been able to forgive my aunt for what she has done to me, I cannot forgive her for what she did to my mother. Kept her in financial hardship for a decade while she sat on a bank account full of cash and assets. Or what she did to my sister. Forced her to pay for damages because the water heater burst while my aunt and mother was away one weekend, leaving my sister at home. She didn't discover the flooded rooms for hours, my aunt's reasoning. It was her responsibility to watch the house, not the responsibility of the homeowner to replace the water heater before it goes. Let's leave that upfront $5,000 financial burden before the flood insurance kicks in on a 16-year-old girl. I've had little to no contact with my aunt since I was kicked out of the house nearly 2 decades ago. But I do keep in constant contact with my cousins. While I'm not going to divulge what I do for a living, I can say that I work with and for the government. I've worked my ass off getting to where I'm at today. I'm known for being truthful, wise, and giving good advice when asked. Because of this, I often talk financially with my cousins, all of whom are money smart and are doing well for themselves. They often then relay this information to their scheming mother, who has no mind for business and investments. All that money she got from her house sale, her divorce settlement, her previous investments is pretty much gone. I spent years planning on the perfect trap, and it took a long time to prepare everything to make sure everything appeared right. Ayanal and I don't pretend to know the law, but I do know the regulations and laws pertaining to insider information. This is not that. 100% certain of it, and if I ever go to court, I know my lawyer has a solid case in my defense. But is this a grey area? Most definitely. I let slip to my cousins about some future real estate plans near my aunt's new area of living. It may be worth a lot more because of future development taking place in the area. All of that was true and backed up by what was in the newspaper and new construction signs that newly appeared on Google Maps at the time. The rest was fabricated by myself, backed up by actual information I looked up on real estate websites and on projects I was working on through my work. The telephone game takes place, and a few weeks later, I presume, my aunt starts making phone calls to real estate agents trying to buy lots of land in the undeveloped area of her new house. Over the course of a few months to a half a year, she spends $300,000 of her last remaining savings on land, hoping it will pay out when the area around it gets developed in the upcoming years. Only HUD Government City doesn't have any plans to develop in those immediate areas. In fact, analysis showed that building in those areas was poor planning and would cost the taxpayers 2 to 3 times as much as the land was not environmentally sound. It was best to build 6 miles away. This post was long overdue because it's been over 2 years since my aunt purchased land that is basically worthless. See, she won't sell the land unless she gets at least the same price she paid for it because she's the owner of that land. Can't tell her what to do on her own land. Sweet karma strikes in a way I couldn't possibly have foreseen. My cousin informed me that the value of the land has decreased significantly because it's not environmentally sound to build anything commercial there, but it's zoned for commercial use. Currently, 3 of the 4 blocks of land she purchased are just weed farms next to eyesore abandoned buildings or industrial complexes. Nobody can build on it, and nor does anyone want to buy it. Sucks to be her. Best part is, my cousins have absolutely no idea that I set them up for their mother to take the fall. These environmental results are relatively new and the perfect cover to say why the project changed locations 6 miles away. TL. Doctor abusive. Aunt torments my family and myself for a decade and more. Decades later, I am in a position to trick her buying worthless land. Icing on the cake, that land can't be used for its intended purpose and has devalued significantly. Note, there seems to be some confusion as to my cousins being cheated out of their inheritance. Their father and his side of the family is still extremely wealthy, and each of my cousins are money-wise and financially independent. Yes, there is more to this story, but none I can confirm or follow up on at this time. The revenge was masterfully planned and flawlessly executed. After years of manipulation and control, the aunt's greed and arrogance became her undoing. Tricked into investing her last savings in worthless land, she's now left with a devalued property she can't offload